Let's talk about Illustrator's effects. Got a lot of them underneath this button right here. Effects are really cool, but let me get something off my chest real quick here, and then I'll be happy. Don't use effects just to use them. Remember what you're doing in any application, Illustrator, Photoshop, InDesign. You're communicating. You're making a design. You're doing a brochure. You're doing a newsletter. You're doing a poster or a banner in Illustrator. Use the effects to get my attention. Don't use them to impress me that you can use them. Always think about what you're trying to say. If one of the effects helps you say that, then use it. If not, as hard as that is, and my students at university always have this problem, they want to add one more effect. If it helps say what you want to say, then use it. If not, leave it out. Okay, I'm better now. Let's get going. Effects can be applied to any object in Adobe Illustrator, including things like place documents and photographs. You can use them for anything. It wasn't that long ago that we actually had two pull-down menus. We had effects and filters, if you remember that. There was a big difference between effects and filters. Filters were permanent, effects were temporary. So in other words, there are no more filters. Everything that you do in effects is actually a non-destructive editing feature to an object or a photo. I like that. Before we get into them, though, it's important to understand how you control them. Let's do this. Let's come over here and pick up an object, just something as simple as a square rectangle, and just draw that on the screen. Let's make that color something else but black. Okay, let's do this. Let's apply a filter. And I think it is so cool that you can actually put a Gaussian blur onto a vector object and then change your mind 2 days later. We'll go Gaussian blur. We'll just run a little quick blur on it, and there you go. So we have a Gaussian blur. You ever blown these up and looked at them? Watch this. You see, well, Andy, that's why I don't use these. Because they're cool, and they look great on the screen. But when I try to print them, they look bad. That's because you haven't set up the effects for the document. And this is an important thing to remember. The effects can be learned, but if you don't know how to apply them properly, they're not going to work for you, especially if you're going out to print. Go up to the word effect again, and go down to Document Raster Effects Settings. That's a mouthful. In this dialog box, we have Color Model. It says RGB because, as you can see, we are in an RGB image. It would say CMYK if we were there. Now we can go RGB, grayscale, or bitmap. Understand the operative word in that dialog box name is the word document. You are not changing an object here. You're doing it for the whole document. I don't have this thing selected down here, but if I go, say, to bitmap, which is basically on and off, and click OK, any object on the screen will be changed to that particular form. So we don't like that. I'll press undo. Let's go back up there again. The next one down is resolution, and this is where you might be missing it in terms of the quality to print. The default is screen 72. PowerPoint, web stuff, PDF documents, things that are read or looked at on a screen, that's your number. You want to go a little bit higher, medium end to low end, inkjet, laser printer kind of stuff is going to be fine at 150. High is where you're going for your high-end equipment and presses. Watch the difference. Let me go ahead and select high and then click OK. It'll take a second. Look at that. See the difference? The difference is it looks good. That would look good to print. The 72 wouldn't. But understand it's doing it to all the objects in the document, not just one. Let's go back up there one more time and let's go back down here. I'm going to take that back to 72 for our demonstrations in this lesson because that makes things work faster. Background can be white or transparent. White means if the object is not a perfect square or a rectangle, it's going to have a background of white. No, I'd rather have that transparent. So I leave that on. Of course, that's the default. Options for anti-alias. Well, number one, anti-alias makes things look smoother. However, I would suggest that you leave that off to maintain the crispness of fine lines and small text. Create a clipping mask. Well, it creates a mask that makes the background appear transparent, but you don't need that if you're doing select transparent for background. The next one adds an area around the object. Default is 36 pixels. Some effects, when you apply them, make the object bigger. Like, for example, a Gaussian blur does make the object bigger. This gives some of the effects room to grow in. The default is 36 pixels. And if you want to preserve your spot colors, you can click here. All of these items together, remember we took this back down to 72, comprise the document raster effects settings. Know that you have them because it might mean the difference between success to output or failure.